EastEnders, Phil's biggest feuds. If there's one soap character who could start a fight in an empty room, it's EastEnders resident hardman Phil Steve McFadden. Since 1990, Phil's hobby has been squaring up to any local who dares to challenge him. This week, battle lines are drawn between Phil and Nish Panesar Navin Chowdhry over a business deal. Soon, Nish enlists his son Navin Chowdhry to help him get revenge on the Mitchells. Not only is Nish far from the first to start a feud with Phil, he's the latest in a long line. So let's take a look at Phil's most memorable opponents. The first notable feud for Phil was with younger brother Grant Roskamp. The pair were initially Walford's answer to the craze, until Phil had an affair with Grant's wife Sharon Dean. Their betrayal was uncovered when Grant heard a recording of Sharon confessing to best mate Michelle Fowler Susan Tully. He attacked Phil, putting him in hospital with severe injuries. Phil and Grant went on to have further showdowns, but they always came together during a family crisis. Steve Martin Camp discovered that Phil had a fling with his wife, Mel Tamsin Outhwaite. So Steve helped Phil's abused ex, Lisa Shaw Lucy Benjamin flee the country with their baby daughter, Louise. This plan went horribly wrong when Steve and Phil ended up in a car chase, and Steve crashed with Louise in the backseat. After rescuing her, Phil hesitated when deciding whether to save Steve, who ultimately perished when the car caught fire. Phil and Grant teamed up to threaten Johnny Allen Murray after he organized the mugging of their mom Peggy Mitchell Barbara Windsor. Later, Phil planned revenge when Johnny targeted Sharon, causing Johnny to have Sharon's husband Dennis Rickman Nigel Garment murdered. Phil and Grant searched for Johnny to make him pay, but after finding themselves on the back foot, Johnny's daughter Ruby Louise Allen persuaded him to surrender, and he suffered a fatal heart attack in prison. Phil's poor treatment of wife Kathy Gillian Tailforth led to resentment from her son Ian Adam Woodye, who was then bullied by Phil. Ian memorably discovered injured Phil moments after he was shot the first time but left him for dead. Yet when Ian's daughter Lucy Hetty Bywater was killed, Phil offered genuine support. Still, this didn't stop Phil trying to kill Ian over the death of Denny Erkman Landau years later. Ian may be Phil's longest-standing enemy, but Phil has always had bigger fish to fry. This rivalry has been back and forth several times. Jack first riled Phil by taping the latter's confession of his role in Kerry Inwick's Phil Daniels' death. Jack blackmailed Phil, demanding he sign over the car lot. Despite this, Jack fell for Phil's cousin Ronnie Samantha Womack. Later, Phil taunted Jack over Sharon, leading Jack to attack Phil, mistakenly believing he had killed him. Sharon became a catalyst yet again years later, when her then-husband Phil held Jack captive as he wrongly suspected they were sleeping together. When Phil's son Ben Max Bowden fell in love with Callum Tony Clay, Phil welcomed him into the family. But rookie police officer Callum was manipulated into gathering evidence on Phil in order to save his beloved Ben from prison. Ben forgave his boat, but raging Phil held Callum at gunpoint. Callum stood his ground, and what spared when a hit-and-run interrupted their confrontation. Now married to Ben, Callum continues to stand up to the more mellowed Phil whenever necessary. Keanu Danny Walters proved his worth in the family business, and seemed committed to Phil's daughter Louise the keeper. But Keanu had an affair with Phil's wife Sharon, leaving both women pregnant. In true Mitchell style, Phil orchestrated Keanu's murder, but it backfired. One violent clash and boat crash later, Keanu ran away, until he reappeared as Phil's unlikely accomplice to take down DCI Keeble Allison Newman. Phil then begrudgingly agreed to end his vendetta so long as Keanu steered clear of him. Keeble was determined to make Phil pay for the murder of her father, although as seen via flashback, The culprit was actually Phil's late father, Eric George Russell. Phil and his cousin Billy Terry Fenwick were both present on the night in question. So Keeble ordered Phil to stitch up Billy or she'd jail him for good. Keeble lost control and kidnapped Phil's fiancée Slater Jessie Wallace and her son Tommy "Funny" Kendall. But when Cobb accidentally shot the detective in self-defense, Keeble gave up her plotting and retired. Watch the latest EastEnders spoilers